Welcome to Tabo Eminent Channel. On April 2, 2005, John Paul II, history's most well-traveled pope and the first non-Italian to hold the position since the 16th century, dies at his home in the Vatican. 6 days later, 2 million people packed Vatican City for his funeral, said to be one of the biggest in history. John Paul II was born Karol Józef Wojtyła in Wadowicz, Poland, 35 miles southwest of Krakow, in 1920. After high school, the future pope enrolled at Krakow's Jagiellonian University, where he studied philosophy and literature and performed in a theatre group. Thanks for watching. Request you to subscribe the channel. During World War II, Nazis occupied Krakow and closed the university, forcing Wojtyła to seek work in a quarry and, later, a chemical factory. By 1941, his mother, father, and only brother had all died, leaving him the sole surviving member of his family. Although Wojtyła had been involved in the church his whole life, it was not until 1942 that he began seminary training. When the war ended, he returned to school at Jagiellonian to study theology, becoming an ordained priest in 1946. He went on to complete 2 doctorates and became a professor of moral theology and social ethics. On July 4, 1958, at the age of 38, he was appointed auxiliary bishop of Krakow by Pope Pius XII. He later became the city's archbishop, where he spoke out for religious freedom while the church began the Second Vatican Council, which would revolutionize Catholicism. He was made a cardinal in 1967, taking on the challenges of living and working as a Catholic priest in communist Eastern Europe. Once asked if he feared retribution from communist leaders, he replied, "I'm not afraid of them. They are afraid of me." Wojtyła was quietly and slowly building a reputation as a powerful preacher and a man of both great intellect and charisma. Still, when Pope John Paul I died in 1978 after only a 34-day reign, few suspected Wojtyła would be chosen to replace him. But, after 7 rounds of balloting, the Sacred College of Cardinals chose the 58-year-old, and he became the first ever Slavic pope and the youngest to be chosen in 132 years. A conservative pontiff, John Paul II's papacy was marked by his firm and unwavering opposition to communism and war, as well as abortion, contraception, capital punishment and homosexual sex. He later came out against euthanasia, human cloning and stem cell research. He traveled widely as pope, using the 8 languages he spoke: Polish, Italian, French, German, English, Spanish, Portuguese and Latin, and his well-known personal charm, to connect with the Catholic faithful, as well as many outside the fold. On May 13, 1981, Pope John Paul II was shot in St. Peter's Square by a Turkish political extremist, Mehmet Ali Ağca. After his release from the hospital, the Pope famously visited his would-be assassin in prison, where he had begun serving a life sentence, and personally forgave him for his actions. The next year, another unsuccessful attempt was made on the Pope's life, this time by a fanatical priest who opposed the reforms of Vatican II. Although it was not confirmed by the Vatican until 2003, many believe Pope John Paul II began suffering from Parkinson's disease in the early 1990s. He began to develop slurred speech and had difficulty walking, though he continued to keep up a physically demanding travel schedule. In his final years, he was forced to delegate many of his official duties, but still found the strength to speak to the faithful from a window at the Vatican. In February 2005, the Pope was hospitalized with complications from the flu. Pope John Paul II is remembered for his successful efforts to end communism, as well as for building bridges with peoples of other faiths, and issuing the Catholic Church's first apology for its actions during World War II. He was succeeded by Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger, who became Pope Benedict XVI. Pope Francis, who succeeded Pope Benedict in March 2013, canonized John Paul II in April 2014. His passing was met with an outpouring of grief worldwide, as he was widely respected for his role in advocating for human rights, helping to end communism in Eastern Europe, and fostering interfaith dialogue. Millions of people gathered in St. Peter's Square to mourn his death, and his funeral on April 8, 2005, was attended by world leaders, including US President George W. Bush, British Prime Minister Tony Blair, and UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan. Following his death, Pope Benedict XVI was elected as his successor on April 19, 2005. John Paul II was later canonized as a saint in 2014 by Pope Francis. The death of Pope John Paul II, a historic moment in the Catholic Church on April 2, 2005, at 9:37 p.m. Vatican time, Pope John Paul II took his final breath in his private residence in the Apostolic Palace. His death ended one of the longest and most influential papacies in history, lasting 26 years, 1978 to 2005. Final days, declining health and last words. In his final weeks, the Pope's health rapidly deteriorated due to complications from Parkinson's disease, septic shock, and heart and kidney failure. Despite his suffering, he refused hospitalization and chose to remain in the Vatican, surrounded by his closest aides and doctors. Thousands of faithful Catholics gathered in St. Peter's Square, praying and holding vigils as they awaited news of his condition. Worldwide mourning and an unprecedented funeral as soon as his death was announced, bells tolled in mourning across Rome, and churches worldwide held special masses in his honor. The Pope's body was laid in state in St. Peter's Basilica, where an estimated 4 million people lined up for hours to pay their last respects. Many slept on the streets of Rome, waiting for their turn to see him one last time. His funeral on April 8, 2005, became one of the largest gatherings of world leaders in history. Attendees included US Presidents George W. Bush, Bill Clinton, and George H.W. Bush, British Prime Minister Tony Blair, French President Jacques Chirac, UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan, religious leaders from Orthodox Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. A defining moment of the funeral came when the crowd began chanting. Legacy and canonization. Pope John Paul II was beatified in 2011 and canonized as a saint in 2014 by Pope Francis, just 9 years after his death, one of the fastest canonizations in modern history. He is remembered as a champion of human rights, a leader who helped end communism in Eastern Europe, and a figure who bridged gaps between religions. John Paul II's lasting legacy. Even after his death, John Paul II continues to shape history. 1. The fall of communism in Eastern Europe. He played a pivotal role in ending communism, particularly in his native Poland. His support for the Solidarity movement, led by Lech Walesa, inspired millions to resist the Soviet-backed regime. Historians credit his influence as one of the key factors that led to the collapse of the Iron Curtain. 2. A pope for the youth. He started World Youth Day, which continues to inspire young Catholics worldwide. 3. Bridging gaps between faiths. He was the first pope to visit a synagogue and a mosque, strengthening relations between Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. 4. Apologizing for the Church's past. He publicly apologized for the Church's historical wrongs, including the Inquisition and the Church's inaction during the Holocaust. Final words on his legacy. Pope John Paul II was more than a religious leader. He was a global statesman, a moral authority, and a symbol of unity. His death was one of the most significant moments of the 21st century, and his influence remains alive through millions of people who continue to be inspired by his teachings.